All right, well, welcome everyone. I think we're going to get started. People may be joining as we come. So I'll take just a minute to introduce myself, welcome you all to the webinar, and then we're going to get into a lot of information. So I'm Erin Skelly. I'm the Assistant Director for Student Services here at Berkeley International Office. I'm joined by our Director, Ivor Emanuel, as well as most of our student advising team. I will be presenting, but we want all of you to know how much we support you, especially as we move through complex information and changing times. So we're here to talk about the F-1 and J-1 student duration of status policy changes that are happening in the future. I do want to make sure that you're aware that this webinar will be recorded. It will be posted on our website and the slides will be posted. So if you've missed anything, you need to go back and look at it later, or if you have friends who missed the webinar, it will be publicly available. It may take us a few days to get the recording up, but you'll have the information soon. So just checking in, before we begin, I just want to make sure that we have the right people in the room. So is this webinar for me? This webinar is actually for F-1 and J-1 students who have a UC Berkeley I-20 or DS 2019. So if you're from a different school and you're not going to be attending UC Berkeley as a student, this is not the webinar for you. Or if you're attending UC Berkeley Extension, this is not the webinar for you. But if you're going to be attending Berkeley, or you already are, and you're an enrolled degree-seeking student or a UC EAP exchange student, or you'll be a new student for the fall, or if you're one of our F1s who graduated and is on post-completion OPT, or you're a J1 who finished their degree at Berkeley and is doing post-completion academic training. We're being specific because we have information that's just for you. And this webinar is not intended for J1 research scholars, postdocs, or faculty. There are many different kinds of J categories. We're here to talk about J1 students. Unfortunately, we're not able to take questions. I see someone's raised their hand. We have pre-submitted questions. We have too many people to take live questions. But if you are a J1 research scholar, this is not the right webinar for you. But if you graduated from Berkeley and you're on post-completion academic training, this is the right webinar for you. Okay, so second thing, this is just the beginning. This is a big rule. There are a lot of changes, and there's a lot of information to get through. This webinar is just the first. It's an overview. We're not getting into high levels of detail. And we may not have all of the answers that you want right now. We are still continuing to analyze this complex rule as the guidance begins to trickle out. We're going to be continuing updates, and we will have ongoing webinar series breaking down each of the topics. So you'll notice that there are some key topics we'll be addressing, like OPT, extensions, travel. We're going to continue with those and give you more detailed information later. This is just to get you with a basic understanding of what's happening. We're going to continue to update and build out our duration of status rule webpage with resources, informational materials, and we will be posting our webinars like this one, videos, and frequently asked questions to that webpage. So we're building all of that now, and it will continue. And I'm just confirming once more that yes, we're going to record this and post it on the webpage for you. So here's an overview of what we're going to go over today. First, we're going to talk about understanding just what's happening. What's the rule? What is duration of status? Just so that you have a basic understanding. And then we're going to drop into what the key aspects of the rule are, because there are several kind of key issues of change that are important for you to understand. Then we'll get into what you can do. I know a lot of students are anxious, they're worried, they feel like they need to take immediate actions, and we'll talk about what the things are that you should be thinking about and what you can do right now. And then we'll get into a pre-submitted Q&A. Many of you submitted questions, and we're so grateful for that. I'm going to get to as many as I possibly can, but we do have limited time. And finally, I'll give you some resources if you want more information as we go. We are not taking live questions and answers just because there's too many students, and we want to get through all of the materials. Okay, so here's an introduction to the rule, the basics. The rule came out on Friday, July 17th. You can see a link to the rule there. The rule has an effective date in the future, September 15th, 2026. And this rule has two major impacts. So I want you to fix that in your mind, that the rule is doing two pretty big things. One is the elimination of what's called duration of status and the reduction of the F-1 grace period. J-1s already had a shorter grace period than F-1s. And there are academic restrictions. That is a second piece of the rule. And that is there are restrictions to F-1 changes of major, level, and school transfers. J's already had some restrictions, so they didn't need to make changes. The elimination of duration of status has several components that include formal extension processes that are more complex than what we see now, including for practical training, and providing a fixed end date, a period of stay, and a reduction of the F-1 grace period to a shorter period, which is 30 days. So to begin, we want to make sure that everybody actually understands what duration of status is. It's a word, it's a phrase that's not commonly understood. So currently, when an F-1 or J-1 enters the United States, you get this I-94 that shows how long you were allowed to be here and what class of visa that you arrived on. So it says class of admission F-1, admit until date. This is a big deal now, this word, admit until date. Right now, when Fs and Js enter the US, they're given duration of status as their admit till date, meaning they are allowed to stay here for the duration of status. It's not a date. DS allows Fs and Js a flexible time period to complete their degrees, and the extension process, if you need more time to finish or to apply for post-completion training, is much simpler. You can extend for academic programs just with the school or transfer fairly simply. And if you want to apply for post-completion employment, that process does involve the government, but it's less complex. And there's a grace period. So the grace period is the period of time after the I-20 or DS 2019 expires, or for those of you that are on OPT, after your OPT expires, your EAD. Currently, F-1s have a 60-day grace period, and that can be used to depart the US, transfer, or apply for OPT. J-1s have a 30-day grace period, and they can use that to depart the US. So what's changing is that people are now getting a fixed end date. So a date is now there, and if you need to stay in the US beyond your fixed end date, you have to take additional actions to extend what's called your period of stay, to extend that admit until date, the AUD. If you stay longer than that without requesting an extension of stay, there are really serious immigration consequences, including accruing what's called days of unlawful presence. So this is a big deal. And the grace period for F-1s is now changing to match J-1s. So both Fs and Js would only have 30 days. So then let's get into the key points. First up, the effective date. It's effective in the future. So for right now, and until September 14th, the current rule remains in effect. So we can still do the same things that we did, extend programs, apply for OPT normally, transfer students, all of those things up until September 14th, we can continue to do under the current regulations. F and Js who enter before the effective date on September 15th may qualify for certain transition provisions. So if you get in here and then things change, there are certain transition provisions which may apply to you. But for many people, those transition provisions really aren't that exciting. We'll get into it a little bit later. The primary benefits tend to be for people that are very soon applying for OPT. If you leave and come back after the effective date, then you're going to be allowed into the country with that fixed end date, and you won't be eligible for any of the transition provisions. The academic restrictions become effective on or after the effective date. It doesn't matter if you're in the US or you're out of the US or you travel. The academic stuff immediately begins to apply after the effective date. So let's start with fixed end date and duration of stay so that everybody can understand what this is. Fs and Js are now going to have what's called a fixed end date, and we're going to call that the admit until date, the AUD, and we're using that abbreviation throughout this presentation. So what that means is when an F or a J enters the US, the AUD, the period of time you're allowed to stay in the US, will either be your I-20 or DS 2019 end date plus 30 days, or 4 years plus 30 days, whichever is shorter. So I want you to really absorb that phrase, whichever is shorter. So if you enter the US and you're in a 2-year degree program, you would get your admission to the end of your I-20 plus 30 days. But if you're in a 6-year degree program and you enter the US and your end date is 6 years in the future when you arrive, well, you're only going to get the maximum entry point, which is 4 years and 30 days. Your I-20 can be issued for longer than your AUD. Essentially, immigration is making you check in if you have a longer period of study. Remaining in the US beyond that AUD, beyond that maximum admission date, requires extension of stay process. So you have to take certain actions to get more time in the US. This is for people entering. If you're already here on September 15th, you also will be transitioned to a new admit until date. It's not different for you. You still get a fixed end date. You still have a fixed period of stay, but you get some small benefits from being present. You can stay in the US until the end of your I-20 or DS 2019, well, the end of your I-20, excuse me, if you're an F-1, plus 60 days, or 30 days if you're a J-1. So F-1s, if you're here on the 15th, your max end date would be the end of your I-20 plus 60 days, or 4 years plus 60 days if your I-20 end date is longer. It just depends, whichever of those dates is shorter. J's, if you're here on the 15th, the same plus 30 days. So either the end of your DS 2019 or 4 years plus 30 days, whichever of those dates is shorter. Anybody who leaves after the 15th, when you come back, you're going to get the 30-day grace period. So I do want people to understand that nobody gets to remain forever. Extensions will be required, even if you're here on the 15th. But being here on the 15th gets you a little bit of benefit if you remain and you don't exit the US before you take certain actions. So to stay beyond that fixed end date, you would have to timely file an extension of stay application, and we're going to call that the EOS, extension of stay. And you're either filing an application with immigration, or an alternate way to extend your time is to leave the US and then return with an I-20 end date that is later and receive a newer and later AUD. So if your I-20 expires in 2027 and you leave and come back, you'd be admitted for that date. There are lots of different reasons people need to extend, and that includes academic, like you need more time to finish your degree, but you'd also need an extension if you're transferring to another school, if you're changing your academic level, or if you're applying for post-completion practical training. And F2s and J2s, if you have dependents, children, spouses, they also have to do the same things. They have to apply to extend or travel if they need more time, the same as the primary. And failing to extend on time is going to have really serious consequences. So we want you to be aware of these things and really pay attention. And we will be messaging you, sending you lots of information to remind you of the things that you need to do. But the time that it takes to do these things is going to take longer than it used to. So how do you apply for an extension of stay? It's a two-step process when you're doing it with immigration. So there's two ways to do it. One is you'd have to apply to immigration and submit an application to immigration. And that step first requires that you extend your I-20 with us. You have to request a new I-20 or DS 2019 before that document expires. And then you have to file with immigration. Timely filing is really important in these cases. Basically, immigration has to receive your application for the extension of stay before the end date of your current AUD. So remember that that AUD is going to be the end of your I-20 or 4 years, depending on, whichever is shorter, plus 30 or 60 days. It's going to depend on your grace period, but you're going to have a set end date and you have to apply before that set end date. But something very important that we'll talk about later for F1s, you need to file before your I-20 end date, the original end date, because if you don't get to retain certain automatic extension of employment benefits. So if you're working on campus and you need to extend for another year of your program and you apply to immigration, you need to get everything together and apply before your I-20 actually expires for that initial time. If you file during your grace period after your original expiration, you might make the deadline, but you're going to lose certain benefits. And we got a lot of questions about, well, what do I have to show for the extension of stay? We're going to go over all of this in much higher level detail and have extension webinars and tutorials. But for now, what you should know is either you're showing that you already had an I-20 or DS 2019 that had additional time to complete the degree. For example, you're a PhD in a 6-year program and you were given a 6-year I-20, but you're only given 4 years at entry. So you have to apply for an extension. That's a reason. Or you actually have come to the end of what normally would have been your I-20 and you have a compelling academic reason, or you have a documented illness, or there's circumstances beyond your control, which are pretty extreme. They mention natural disasters or school closures. So generally it's an academic reason or illness. Delays caused by academic probation, or what they call a repeated unwillingness to complete your program requirements, will not be approved. So immigration has concerns about people that are, having ongoing academic issues, are not completing on time repeatedly. So keeping that in mind, an important thing for you is to stay on track with your degree and check in with your academic advisors, with us, if you're having academic concerns. The other option, if your AUD is coming up, you're coming to the end of that period of stay, the other way that you can extend that date is to simply leave. You extend your I-20, leave the US before the end of your authorized period of stay, and when you return, you'd be given a new period of authorized stay starting from your new entry date. So I'll give you a couple examples. We've got a PhD with an I-20 end date of May 16th, 2031. But this student only has an authorized admit until date of until October 15th, 2030, because their admit until date can only be up to 4 years in the future, right? Their I-20 is longer, but that admit until date, they have a shorter period. This student decides to travel in the summer 2027. So they leave for summer break and they come back in August. So our expectation is that this student, when they come back, they're going to be given a new admit until date until June 15th, 2031, because now they're in range of that entry. They're within 4 years of the end of their I-20. So they can get the maximum end date for their I-20 plus 30 days. So we're thinking that some extensions are going to work their way out over the course of your student life cycle if you have a longer program. When you travel, you'll be admitted to a new date if that date is later on your I-20 and it's within 4 years. Another example is an undergraduate who's planning ahead. They know that they have a May 14th, 2027 I-20 end date, and their admit until date is June 16th, 2027, 60 days later. They apply for an I-20 extension in December, so they apply early. They get an extended I-20 with a new end date of December 17th. This student leaves the US, travels over that winter break in 2026, and comes back in January 2027. We expect that this student would then be given a new admit until date of January 16th, 2028, because they were given an I-20 that was extended to 2027. They re-entered the US with that new I-20, and when they entered, they'd be given until the end of that new I-20 plus 30 days. So next, we're getting into academic restrictions. This is a challenging area, and we're looking more into this, but we'll give you the basics of what the new regulations say, and some of these are going to require further guidance. So the new rule provides new restrictions to F-1s related to transfer and change of educational objectives. Educational objectives, that is defined by the government as major and educational level. The new restrictions are that those below the graduate level, so at UC Berkeley, that would be undergraduates, you're getting a bachelor's degree, you cannot transfer or change your educational objectives, so change major or level, during the first academic year of the program that gave you the I-20. So that would mean if you're a new student for Berkeley in the fall, you enter the US, within that first academic year, you're not going to be able to decide to transfer to a different school or change your major or change to a different level. Graduate students, you are different. They have higher restrictions for graduate students. Absolutely no transfer or change of educational objective is allowed at any point during the program of study. So during that degree program, you cannot change educational objectives. If you finish the program, then theoretically you could transfer and change to a different major later. But for everybody, there's a key component of this that even if you complete a program after September 15th, so degrees before that don't matter. If you finished a previous degree before September 15th, it does not matter. But moving forward, if you complete a degree in the US after September 15th at one educational level, so let's say you completed a bachelor's level in the US after September 15th, 2026, you can't change to the same level. You couldn't do a new bachelor's degree or a lower level. You have to move up a degree. So you could do a master's, but you couldn't do another bachelor's, or you couldn't do a lower level like an associate's. So once you've finished a degree, you can only move up. Next is continuity of employment. So there is some ability to keep working. So there's a concern that if people are applying for an extension and they're still in school, well, what happens while they're waiting for the extension? If you're applying to immigration for this extension, those processing times could be long. And while you're waiting, as long as you timely filed that request with immigration before your original I-20 expired, so this is just for the F-1s. F-1s, before your I-20 expired, if you filed for your extension, you can continue working on campus or through authorized CPT for up to 240 days while you wait for the approval from immigration. But if you filed your extension of stay with immigration during your grace period after your I-20 had originally expired, you won't get that automatic extension. So who is this important for? This is probably most important for our graduate students with long programs who have, for example, GSR, GSI appointments, that if you're applying for an extension of stay in the US, you need to be really mindful of applying on time before your I-20 expires, really thinking ahead and to preserve your ability to keep working continuously while you wait for the extension approval. This is not applying for OPT or STEM. Those have different procedures. J-1s, you're a little bit different. If you're a J-1, for you, as long as you file your extension of stay with USCIS, with the government, before your admit until date, which includes your grace period, as long as you make it before that final deadline, you can keep working for up to 240 days using your on-campus employment or academic training. So it actually includes academic training for you. There's also for the J-1s, this is different than F-1s. F-1s don't get this. The J-1s, if you file your extension of stay on or before March 18th, 2027, you can keep working to the end of your DS 2019 while the extension of stay is pending. So you get a little bit more benefit for that transition with the continuity of employment. They did not provide that in the new regulations for F-1s, but it is included for the J-1s. So next is F-1 optional practical training, OPT. So I know that we have people who are thinking about applying for OPT. This is F-1 post-completion employment options. So I know we have people who are thinking about applying or people that are already on OPT. But right now we'll talk about what it would take to apply for OPT under the new rules. OPT request under the new rules would require two different things. One, you have to file an I-765, a form with immigration for the employment permission, and you have to file a separate request for extension of stay, or you'd have to extend your stay via that travel and re-entry option. So new OPT is different. Right now, when we apply for OPT, we just submit a request for employment permission, and when they approve your employment, they also approve your ability to stay in the US. This is different. You're asking for two separate things. You're asking for employment permission and you're asking them to extend your authorized admit until date, your AUD. Or you'd have to apply for OPT and subsequently travel and re-enter to get a longer period of time in the US. It also changes deadlines related to OPT. So because the F-1s are changing to a 30-day grace period, that changes the OPT filing period and also the latest requested OPT start date it's all related to this new 30-day grace period. So F-1s, if you're thinking about applying later, what you'd have to do is you would have to request an OPT I-20, submit an application to immigration for your work card, and either apply for an extension of stay with USCIS in the US, or you'd have to exit the US and enter with a new admit date that's later. So it's a more complex process for OPT. No OPT as employment is allowed until you have both those things completed, that you have the employment card from immigration and your extension of stay is approved, or you've extended your stay through travel. And you are allowed to travel while that OPT request is pending. And you can also travel if you submit an extension of stay, but then you later decide to travel. So those are both options. We're not getting into heavy details. This is going to be complex. We're going to have tutorials. We're going to have workshops just on this topic. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed right now. I just want you to know that these are the pathways. If you travel under these OPT provisions, after you travel, your new authorized admit until date will be based on either the dates that you were recommended for OPT if you aren't finished processing with the government, or if you were approved for OPT by the government, it would be based on your approved end date. So when you enter the US, you'll get a new future end date that's beyond your I-20 end date, and that's going to be based on the OPT dates. STEM extension is going to work pretty similarly. STEM extensions are the same. So if you're currently on OPT, you may be able to apply to extend your OPT. Those STEM extension requests have to be filed with immigration before the expiration of your current 12-month OPT card. So you already have to be approved for OPT, and you're going along with your OPT before you can apply for an extension. And there's time frames for that. But they have a deadline of having to apply before that OPT EAD expires. So you have to apply for the extension with immigration before your EAD expires. The extension of stay, not the employment, but the extension of stay, if you file that with the government, that has to be received before your AUD. So again, there are two separate things you're doing. You're filing with immigration for employment, and you're filing to ask them to give you more time in the US. Or you're filing for employment and you're getting that extension of stay by leaving and coming back with a later end date. F-1s can always continue OPT employment for up to 180 days while the STEM OPT is pending. So while the employment request is pending, as long as that application and any extension of stay were timely filed. Okay, so just giving you a second to absorb. I know we've gone through a lot and we're going to keep going, and I do have Q&A, but I do want to get through the basics. So now what we've gone through is the general rules. So the new rules that will apply for anybody that leaves the US or enters or leaves the US and comes back September 15th or later. However, let's talk about transition provisions. So the rule has some limited provisions with some benefits. So in order to qualify for these transition benefits, you have to be in the US. So your body is in the US on September 15th, and your body was in the US on September 14th as well. So you're continuously in the US. And then you would stay in the US. That means you don't depart the US. And for as long as you stay, you continue to retain those benefits. So what do you get? Well, some things are not different for you. You're still going to get a fixed end date. Okay, you don't get an end date that goes on and on. You are still subject to all of the academic restrictions. But the main benefit is two things. One, if you're an F-1, you get to keep your 60-day grace period. Second, if you are an F-1 who would be applying for OPT on or before March 18th, 2026, there are special provisions for you. So my people that are graduating in summer, fall 2026, or spring 2027, so summer 26, fall 26, spring 27, if you're in that group or you're someone who's completing your OPT and could qualify for STEM, you might have some benefits, and that transition could be really important to you. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But for those who aren't in range for OPT, who aren't going to be in range to apply for that, that's when you're finishing your degree. Basically, what you would get is on the day of the transition, September 15th, if you're in the US, you automatically get changed to this maximum end date. And that maximum end date is going to be either the end of your I-20 plus 60 days, so you get a little extra if you're F-1, or 4 years plus 60 days if your I-20 is longer than 4 years. So if you're in a long degree program, let's say you're a new PhD, you enter the US in August, and you don't go anywhere, you're physically present on September 15th, you're automatically going to get transitioned to a fixed end date of November 14th, 2030. So that's 4 years plus 60 days. If you're a J-1, you're going to be automatically transitioned to an end date that is either the end of your current DS 2019 plus 30 days, or if you have a longer DS 2019 that's longer than 4 years, you would get 4 years plus 30 days. So your period of stay, you get a nice long period of stay until October 15th, 2030, if you have a longer degree program. So this is what you get. If you're not eligible for the OPT provision, if you're an F1 or if you're a J1, just be mindful you don't get a lot. And if you're in a long program, we're not saying don't travel for the next 6 years. In fact, traveling might be something you need to do, and it could end up giving you a longer end date. So for a lot of people, the transition doesn't give you much. It gives you maybe a longer grace period if you're an F1. But the issue with that is you'd have to stay for the entirety. You don't get the grace period if you leave the US and you come back. So if any point in your program you leave the US and you come back, well, now you're going to have a 30-day grace period when you get back. So effectively, you're just like everybody else. So let's get into these STEM transition provisions, because I know these are really important for a certain group of people. If you're an F1 and you do not exit and re-enter the US on or after September 15th, you might qualify for specific transition provisions. If you are an F1 student and you file your OPT with immigration on or before March 18th, or you file your STEM extension on or before March 18th, 2027, then you get a special benefit that you don't have to file a separate extension of stay or extend via travel. You just get to file the normal application that we go through right now without this extra step. Your authorized admit until date will be automatically extended until the end of your OPT or the end of your STEM plus 60 days. And when you're applying for OPT, you get to apply based on the 60-day grace period. So you get a bit of a longer period to apply for OPT, and you can choose a later OPT starting date. That's just for people doing 12-month OPT. For STEM, your timelines are set by the expiration of your original OPT. But this is very important. If you leave the US and re-enter before filing for OPT or before filing for STEM, you absolutely lose that transition provision. So if you're graduating in spring 2027 and you travel over winter break and come back, you don't get this provision. You have to file OPT plus extension of stay, because you're coming back with that 30-day grace period when you re-enter. So anybody using this provision, you would not be able to travel until after you've submitted your application to immigration for the OPT. If you exit and re-enter after filing for your OPT or STEM, then you still get to, you don't have to file for a separate extension of stay, but when you come back to the United States, you're going to enter and only be given a 30-day grace period at the end of your OPT or STEM extension. So we kind of get to the point of, well, this is so much. What can we do? What can I do right now? If you're not in the US, you can enter the US before September 15th, 2026. All new students, you should be here. You're supposed to be here by the start of instruction. So new students, you're going to be here and you'll be transitioned. If you're a continuing student, if you're an OPT student, if you're somebody who's on STEM extension, then you may want to enter before September 15th. But for some people, entering before that date doesn't have big benefits because maybe all it gives them is a little bit more grace period, but they don't get anything any better than that, you know? If you plan to transfer your F or J program, if you're finishing in the summer, if you're planning to transfer, you need to get transferred out as soon as possible and make that request to us at least 2 weeks before September 15th to allow sufficient processing time. Or if you're transferring for a future program, we want to get you transferred out. If you're starting somewhere and you're eligible for transfer right now, we want to get you transferred out and set as soon as we can. If you're a student and your graduation time, your estimated graduation time in Cal Central is later than your current I-20 or DS 2019 end date. So if you're a student right now, you look at your I-20 or your DS 2019 and look at that end date. Is that not accurate? Do you know right now that you actually can't finish your degree on time? Have you updated your graduation time in Cal Central? If that is correct, if you can't finish and your estimated graduation time has been updated, then you could request a program extension at least 2 weeks before September 15th. We have to have enough processing time and we may be having a high volume of requests. So we would like to get you extended if you know already that you can't finish your degree by the end date that you currently have. However, what we're not willing to do is give fake or artificial extensions. You need to have real academic reasons that you can't finish on time. And when you make that request to us before September 15th, you are going to have to explain, and your academic advisors will need to explain exactly why you can't complete on time and what it is that you have to do. But if that's correct, now's the time to extend, and we want to get you extended so that you have the right end date when we all get transitioned to this maximum end date. If you're an F-1 who's eligible for OPT or STEM, apply as soon as you're able to apply, and apply before the end of the 6-month transition if that's possible for you. And our advice is don't travel and re-enter before your OPT if you want those transition benefits. The transition benefit is very good for people that can apply for OPT before March 18th, 2027. So who is this? What does this look like? For 12-month OPT, if you're completing a degree in summer 26, fall 26, or spring 27, you can apply for OPT 90 days before your degree completion. So summer people, you can already be applying. Fall people, you could start applying mid-September. Spring 27 graduates, you could be applying mid-February. So all three of those groups have the possibility of applying for OPT or applying for OPT with the transition benefit if you don't leave before you apply for OPT. So I know for some of you, this may be a big deal. You have to make big decisions, but I would say it will be a simpler process for you if you stay in the US and you use the transition benefit. We'll talk more about it later at future workshops, but right now I want to put that in your mind if you are someone who's finishing your degree summer, fall, or spring 27. If you're finishing in summer, don't go anywhere until you've applied for that OPT. You're in the US finishing in summer right now. It's really important for those completing in fall 26 that you get in the US. You don't arrive late for fall. You get here and you're here before September 15th, and you don't go anywhere before you apply for that OPT. Same for the spring people. Don't be late for fall, and make sure that you stick around until you can apply for OPT in February. STEM extension, that means you're already on your OPT right now. You can apply for your STEM extension 90 days before your current OPT expires if you're eligible for STEM. The STEM extension is a more complex application no matter what. It requires higher documentation. If you want to qualify for the transition benefit, your OPT EAD must be expiring on or before June 16th, 2027. If you're on OPT right now and your EAD expires later than that, you're going to be out of range. There's no way you can apply within the transition. But if you are expiring on or before that date, it could be possible for you to apply for extension under the transition as long as you enter the US before September 15th and you don't go anywhere outside of the US until you've applied for that STEM extension. Okay, so we're going to get into the Q&A. We've moved through all of the information. I know it's a lot, and I recommend that you go back and review it later. You look at the slides, and also just a reminder, don't be overwhelmed. I know it's a lot. It's a lot for me to think about and remember, so we don't expect you to get all of this at once. This is just getting you the basics, and we're going to have a lot more. So with that said, I'm going to move to your pre-submitted questions. And I know that maybe your brains are spinning right now. So we're going to go through some of these questions, and hopefully we can break down some of the confusions you might have right now. And if not, we're going to keep going and get you more information later. All right, so these are some of the questions that we got about the general period of stay. And just to let you know, we got a lot of questions. So some of these are condensed. We couldn't answer, all hundreds of your questions, but a lot of them were all the same, or around the same topics. So pre-submitted questions, general period of stay. So this is just about the rule in general and the period of stay, kind of your maximum end date. So we got a lot of questions that were basically something around, I'm from this country, does this rule affect me differently? And for the most part, so the first answer is no, the rule applies the same to everybody. And I would say I got a lot of Canadians asking, is this different for me? So I'd like to tell you, Canadians, no, it's not different for you. You don't get different rules because you're Canadian. The only thing you get as a Canadian that's special to you, other than your specialness as a person, is that Canadians, in order to enter the US, they don't have to go to an embassy and get a visa stamp in their passport. That's the only difference. It's just easier for you to enter the US. You get to travel with all the other documents, I-20 passport, proof of your enrollment, all those things. You just don't have to get a visa stamp in your passport, but nothing else is different for you. So if you're Canadian, the rule isn't written differently for Canadians, but what might be different for you is that you never have to worry about whether your visa stamp and your passport is expired. Everybody else has to worry about that because that impacts their ability to cross the border and enter the US. So if you're Canadian and you're considering your extension options, if you need more time to complete your degree, it might be simpler for you to extend via the travel option than applying to immigration for an extension because maybe you don't have to worry about your visa being expired. while a different person, if the visa stamp in their passport is expired and they leave the US, well, they have to get a new visa if their visa and their passport's expired before they can come back. We'll talk more about that when we talk about travel, but I just want to be clear, Canadians, nothing's different in the rule for you. I also got a question about students from travel ban countries. Does this affect me differently? So nothing specifically in the rule is written in a way that says travel ban country people are different. But I think one thing that you would want to understand is that as long as the travel ban is in effect, you cannot utilize extending by travel. You have to apply to immigration for extension of stay. So if you're applying for OPT for more time to your degree, you don't get the option of possibly, rather than applying to immigration, leaving and coming back with a new end date later. So just keep that in mind. If the travel ban is lifted, you'd have both options. But right now, because there's a travel ban, if you leave the US, you just won't be able to get back. And that's going to impact your ability to finish your degree. What's the impact for current versus new students? So I had a lot of questions that were basically, what about me? What's the impact for me? How does this affect me? I'm this kind of student. I'm that kind of student. Well, it's going to affect everybody a little differently. So I've broken it down into some different categories to talk about, well, what are we really looking at? So let's just talk about new students for a second. If you're a new student, and probably many of you are, if you're a new student and you're entering the US for fall 2026, well, you need to be here by the start of instruction anyway. So you're expected to be here. You're going to be here at the end of August. So we don't have any issues with you there. And then basically this just will be the way of life for you, that when you enter in August, these things will apply to you. And if you're in, for example, you're a new undergrad and you're in a 4-year degree program, you're going to be given a period of stay for 4 years plus 30 or 60 days. And if you travel in between, well, that may adjust your grace period. If you're in a 1 to 2 year degree, like you're in a master's program that's 1 to 2 years, when you enter the US, you're going to be given 2 years plus your grace period. When you apply for OPT, well, if you're in a 1-year program, well, maybe you could apply under the transition provisions if you don't travel because you're graduating in spring 27. If you're graduating way later, well, your OPT process is going to be different. And then we've gotten a lot of worries about our new PhDs. I think the biggest worry that I got, and I really want you to take this to heart, a lot of our students, I think, were confused because of the word admission. When the government uses the word admission, they mean being allowed into the US. So you are allowed to be admitted by the university for a 5 or 6 year degree. That's how long your degree is. Berkeley is going to give you an I-20 for the 5 or 6 years that it takes to finish your PhD. But what will happen as a new PhD when you enter, you're only going to be given 4 years plus a grace period for this entry, that you just get a maximum entry period, and you will need to extend in order to finish your degree. And most likely, over the period of 5 or 6 years that you're in your degree, it is likely that you're going to travel. And if you travel, you're likely to leave and come back and you'll get an extended entry. So I just want some of you to realize nobody's saying you can't finish a degree if you're in a longer degree or that you can't extend. Some things may happen naturally. Transferring in and out, those transferring in for fall, there's not going to be much difference for you. You're going to be the same as everybody else. You're going to get the time to your degree. Transferring out later could be more complex since those rules are really changing. So people that have concerns about other degree programs after their program at Berkeley, we would probably want to talk to you. But right now, it might not be something you have to take immediate action on unless you're finishing a degree really soon and then immediately planning to transfer like, fall or spring. And then one question we got a lot was, will this go away? Or is there anything to stop it, or will it go away if there's a new administration? It's a hard question to answer. Maybe, even if we get a new administration, untangling a new rule, it will take time and processes. Could it be stopped before it starts? It's possible. But right now, we have to act with the reality that this is likely to become the reality, and we have to inform you and make sure you understand. So I think we don't want to spend a lot of time focused on hoping it doesn't happen. What we do want to spend time focused on is making sure that you understand what's happening. Okay, so questions about effective dates and travel. Um, so we got a lot of questions that were more related to, does this rule affect me if I enter before September 15th? Does it impact students who stay in the US and don't travel after the 15th? Well, yes, it affects everybody. The rule affects everybody. It's just certain things, if you enter before the 15th and if you stay, you might get certain benefits like having a longer grace period or having more ease applying for OPT if you're in that transition group. But can you travel after the effective date? Anyone can make a decision to travel, but what you have to consider is the impacts of the travel. If you leave, well, travel can be risky for lots of reasons. But also, will traveling and re-entering, is that going to take away a benefit that's really important for you? Like, are you close to applying for OPT? But if you're 5 years from the end of your program and all that's going to do is shorten your grace period to 30 days, it's probably not a big deal if you travel in a year or you travel in 2 years or you travel over winter break. The bigger question then is there risk to your travel? And our office would want to check in with you and talk to you about the risks of travel. I'm a continuing student and I'm traveling and re-entering after the 15th of September. What is my maximum admit until date calculation based on when I come back? So if you're a continuing student, and pretty much everybody will be once you're here for fall and you entered before the 15th, you're here. Well, if you leave after that date, when you come back, you're going to be given the end of your I-20, the end of your DS 2019 plus 30 days, or 4 years plus 30 days, whichever is shorter, if you're an enrolled student. If you are on OPT, you're going to be given the end of your OPT or your recommended OPT if you're not yet approved, plus 30 days. Or STEM, same thing. You're going to be given the recommended STEM end date or your approved STEM plus 30 days. So it's all based on when you enter and then your end date plus the grace period with a maximum of 4 years. So if your end date is much longer, then you're going to only get 44 years plus the grace period. So some students asked about traveling on in absentia, or traveling on OPT. Does any of this affect me differently? So just like people from different countries, I want to say it's very individual. It's not necessarily about that you're on an absentia or that you're on OPT. There's nothing in the regulations that says travel is any different for you, but the considerations you might have about your travel could be important. So if you're on in absentia, and you're going to be out of the US for a long time with permission from the university, well, we might be concerned if you're graduating soon. And if you don't enter in the US at a certain time period, that could impact maybe your OPT transition benefits if you're graduating soon and you want OPT. Or if you're on OPT and you're traveling and you want to apply for STEM extension, and you're thinking about travel, well, that's a different question versus you're on OPT, you don't plan to do anything in the US after you finish, you're going to go home. Well, maybe travel isn't a big deal. It's more about, is travel risky for you? Because international travel has risks for everybody. Visas take a long time. The borders can be unpredictable. Global events are unpredictable. Can I travel between the effective date, between September 15th and my OPT application? So again, can you do that? You're free to do whatever you like. But if you leave, there could be a consequence. So if you leave and you could apply for OPT by March 18th, you are going to miss an important benefit. You can still apply, but it will be harder for you. If you can't apply for OPT until next fall, 2027, well, yeah, maybe that travel isn't as impactful for you if you travel during that time. Some things might be different for you, but maybe it won't make as much of a difference. So it really depends on your individual situation. My OPT STEM is currently pending with USCIS. What happens if I travel? Well, there are some risks involved with traveling while pending. Maybe talk to a bioadvisor about traveling while pending, and when you're traveling might impact, whether or not you're admitted and have a longer grace period. So again, it's possible for you to travel, but we have to talk to you about your individual case to understand what the impacts could be on you and what might be special, or if there are any concerns that we have. I'm graduating in May 27, and I'm going to start a new educational level in fall 27. Can I travel over summer 27? Possibly. I think what we're more concerned about is the timing of these things, when you're getting new documents, and if you're eligible for that new educational level. Are you moving up a level, or are you going down a level, or is it the same level? So these are concerns that we might have. The travel is part of that concern, but there's multiple things going on. So some of these answers aren't so simple. Can I renew my F-1 visa stamp in my passport? Well, if you leave the US and your visa's expired, the stamp in your passport, you have to get a new visa before you can re-enter. So can you renew it? Well, that depends on the embassy, and the processing time can take a long time. So if you know your visa's expired and you're making a decision to travel, be aware that you don't control the processing time. And that could be riskier travel because you don't control how long the visa's taking. And our new students know they're taking a while. If you're in the US and your visa expires, that's just a travel document. It's just used to cross the border. So that stamp in your passport that you applied for at the embassy, that's just used to cross the border with your other documents. But it doesn't determine how long you're allowed to stay in the US. You're given that allowance when you enter. Do you need to renew the stamp in your passport before September 15th? Not necessarily, but if you're out of the US and you need to get back and it's expired, then yes, you would need to renew your visa. And if you haven't started, you might not be able to be successful in that if you don't start soon because processing times are slow. And then the visa stamp in my passport has expired. Do I have to end my stay, or do I have to apply for an extension of stay because the stamp in my passport expired? No, that's just for crossing the border. If your I-20 or DS 2019 is expiring and your authorized admit until date is expiring, those are things that have to be extended. But the visa in your passport, if you're in the US, it may expire, but the next time you leave the US, you're not going to be able to get back until you have a new passport, a new visa in your passport. A question that's complicated and that I can't really get into right now is, does this impact automatic visa revalidation? This is a very special provision that allows certain types of travel between the US and Mexico. And I'm going to have to save this for a future webinar because I don't really have an ability right now to easily explain automatic visa revalidation. But what I can tell people, if you're already familiar with this, is automatic revalidation is still going to be allowed under the new regulations, but you have to return to the US following automatic visa revalidation rules. And when you re-enter, you're going to be given the same admit until date as before you left. So we'll talk about this later in a travel webinar to make sure that everybody understands. But if your visa is expired and your I-20 is expiring and your admit until date is expiring, this is not a provision that can be used. So questions about extension of stay. We got a lot of these, and a lot of them just kind of came down to several different areas. So a lot of students were worried that they're already in the US and they're worried that when the rule becomes effective, I've been here for 4 years, am I going to have to immediately apply for an extension? Well, what matters is what your I-20 end date is. So when the rule happens, is your I-20 1 year in the future? Well, that's going to be your end date. It's not retroactive that they're going to look back and say you've already been here for 4 years, you don't get more. It's only starting from the 15th of September. And on that date, if you're in the US, they're going to transition you to your fixed end date will be the end of your I-20 plus your grace period, or 4 years plus your grace period if your I-20 is longer than 4 years. So take a look at your I-20 end date and then add your grace period, and that's going to be the period of time that you have an authorized stay. So will extension of stay EOS be easy? Is EOS by travel or by USCIS better? I don't think easy is the term we would use. This process is going to be more complex. We're going to have information for you. We're going to have clear and detailed guides and also guidance so that you can make good decisions, because we can't tell you whether or not extending by travel or extending by immigration is better. But what our office will be able to do is provide you some pros and cons. And if you need advice on your specific situation, we may be able to advise you on, what the limitations are of each one as it applies to you. So what are some of the pros and cons? Well, travel is risky. If your visa is expired or you're from a travel ban country, those are problems for you if you're trying to extend and re-enter with a later end date. If your visa is expired, you take a risk of needing time to get a new visa. Those are the risks, in addition to all the global travel risks. Applying to immigration, well, that might allow you to stay in the US, but the timelines are really important. And the processing times, we don't quite know what they'll be yet. And this is the next question. How long will an extension to immigration take to be approved by USCIS? We don't yet know that. Typically, the form used does take a while. Currently, it's not available for premium processing. We hope that it will be, but until we get some data on this new process, we don't really know how long exactly it's going to take. So we can't give you a guarantee until things start happening, until we actually see these processes in motion. So a question. If I apply for an extension of stay to extend my academic program, so let's say we have an undergrad, you need 2 more semesters to finish your degree because you changed your major. So you apply, you extend your academic program for 1 year. Will I have to apply again to extend my stay for OPT? Yes, you would. So anytime you need more time beyond your end date, so if you extend your academic program, you get that much more time for your academic program. Then if you want OPT, you have to extend again to get more time for your OPT. So you're only getting enough for the next mile point, for the next marker. So when you first come to the US, what you're doing is getting to the end of your degree. So that's what extensions are based on. If you're completing your degree, then an extension would be based on maybe transferring to another degree or changing to a higher level, or applying for OPT, applying for J-1 academic training. This is a complicated question. So I got this from a few students. So this is about green card filing. Does filing I-140 or I-485 impact filing an extension of stay? This is a question for you to take back to your attorney. And if you are filing a green card and you're not working with an attorney, it's time for you to start talking to them, because this change, I don't know. And this is a complicated question. And it's when I would invite you, once things settle out, and we have a bit more guidance from the government, I think it's going to be important for you to check in with your lawyer, check in with our office so that we can advise you. Because requesting an extension of stay from immigration, you're asking immigration for something. And there could be impacts between those two requests. That's the most that I could say. When can I or should I apply for an extension of stay? So these are, again, we've got two different ways to do that. With immigration, USCIS, applying to immigration in the US, or by travel. Extending by travel, well, that might happen just if you have an I-20 with a longer end date. If you know, next year that you're going to need another year on your program, or you need another semester, that might happen whenever you request an I-20 extension and make a decision to travel. Applying to immigration to extend, that's a different question. The timelines were not yet exactly clear how early you can apply. Some of them seem to suggest it could be up to 180 days, but we're still waiting for guidance on that. How early should you apply? Probably as early as you're able to, and as early as you're able to confirm your actual end date. But applying years in advance with immigration for an extended end date, that might not make a lot of sense, because you might actually travel in between, so you might not need to do it. So this is kind of a tricky question right now. It's probably too early to tell how early people need to be applying if we're talking long term. Should I delay my graduation? No. Nobody should delay their graduation. Everybody needs to finish on time. That is becoming more and more important. No delays, no dragging your feet. What you're here to do is finish your degree. So artificially delaying your graduation is not something that's going to help you. What you need to do is make good progress and move towards your completion. If you are delayed because you're having issues or you've had some academic changes, check in with us. But this is not something you want to plan for. Can I apply for extension of stay if the visa stamp in my passport's expired? Well, you could likely apply to immigration, but if you're applying by travel, you'd have to have a new visa before you can return. Can I apply for extension of stay if my I-20 is expired? This is a complicated question because you have to extend your I-20 before it expires. It is possible to get your extended I-20 and then apply during what would have been your grace period. And we talked about that. So if you got your I-20 extended, but then you didn't apply until the grace period, you're going to lose some benefits with continuous employment, but you could still apply until the end of your grace period, until the end of your admit until date. But if your I-20 is already expired and then you're coming to our office asking for your I-20 to be extended, you may have quite limited options. Letting your I-20 expire is not a thing that should happen, or your DS 2019. So academic issues. What if I'm admitted to a new program of study after September 15th? I would say this is something we need to check in with you about. So we need to see, are you eligible for that new program of study? Is it what have you already completed? Is it higher level? Are you a graduate student? Can I change my major, my degree level? Possibly, but it's going to depend on the new restrictions. Have you been here for an academic year? Are you a graduate student? We need to know what's happening. Under the new rule, would receiving an MS en route to my PhD count as a change in educational objective? So this is a good question. Many of you are admitted to PhD programs, and along the way, you happen to earn an MS. This is indicated in the kind of the description part of the rule. They do indicate that if this is along the way, it's not a separate degree, it's just along the way, that would be considered part of the PhD program. But if you're adding a second major or a totally new master's that isn't part of that program, that would be different. Okay, then getting to the pre-submitted questions for OPT and STEM. So I'm going to keep going because I know we definitely have OPT STEM people that want to hear questions. Can I still apply for OPT STEM? So I got this several times. Yes, you can definitely still apply. It's just the mechanism for applying and being approved is going to be changing. So for people that aren't using the transition provisions, your applications are going to be more complex than they currently are. I want to know the details about applying for OPT STEM. I can't give you the details in this webinar, but we will have them for you. But again, the short answer is you have to get a recommendation on your I-20 for OPT for STEM. You have to apply to immigration for work permission. And if the new rule is applying to you, you're not transitioning, you also have to apply for an extension of stay. So those are the basics, but there's lots of details and we'll have information ready for you. We're working on it and we will have that in time for people applying for OPT. Can you apply for OPT before the extension of stay? Yes, it is possible to submit your request for employment before you've requested the extension of stay. However, you won't be approved if you haven't been approved for an extension of stay. So they're kind of separate things. So you're submitting either one or two applications to the government. And if you apply for employment, then you could request an extension with the government as a separate application or by travel and entering with a longer end date. So again, you're going to have two options, but you have to do both. Transition people, if you're applying before March 18th, if you don't leave the US before you apply, you only have one application. You just ask for the employment and you get both. How long will it take to be approved? We really don't know the answer to this because we don't know how long the EOS is going to take. We don't know how long the OPT is going to take in this new world. So I don't know. We'll get back to you when we have more data. When should I apply for OPT? So we have information about OPT on our webpage. You're limited in when you can apply. You can apply for OPT 90 days before completion. You can apply for STEM 90 days before your OPT expires. Those are hard limits. We would be advising you to apply as early as you possibly can. My OPT has already been approved. So you're a person who applied, you've already been approved, or you're currently pending. Do I have to file an extension of stay? No, you do not. You don't have to do that because you applied before the rule is becoming effective. You get this provision that you are allowed to kind of keep what you had when you applied. But when you exit and re-enter the US, if you did that, you'd only be given a 30-day grace period. Can I travel if my OPT is pending or approved? It is possible to travel, but travel is its own thing. So if you're from a travel ban country, that would be a problem. If you need a new visa, that could pose problems for you. So travel has risk, but the question of, is it possible to travel if OPT is pending? Yes, you can leave the US, but are you going to have any problems getting back? Well, that's a different question. Does the rule impact changing employers on OPT? No, it doesn't change anything about OPT itself. It just changes the mechanism to apply, but none of the OPT rules have changed. Does it affect the number of days I need to find an OPT job after graduation? Yes, it could in certain ways. The number of maximum unemployment days has not changed. During your 12 months of OPT, your maximum employment is 90 days. During STEM, it increases. So it doesn't change that maximum days of unemployment. The days of unemployment start from your OPT date. What's changing is that for the 12-month OPT, if you're applying and you have a 30-day grace period, your OPT is going to start earlier, within 30 days of graduation. So in that case, if you're not one of the transition group where you could ask for a later OPT start date, you have to have an OPT start date within 30 days of graduation. And if you're approved for that start date and your start date comes and you don't have a job, that's when days of unemployment would start. So you don't get to choose as late of a start date if you're not under the transition provision. Okay, J-1 academic training. So I know our J-1s are still out there too. Is applying for J-1 academic training the same as applying for OPT? No, it isn't. Academic training, you actually apply through the school for the employment permission. And for you, you have some different provisions. You do have to apply for an extension of stay, but you have those nicer transition provisions with the 240 days, or if you apply before March 18th. So how you apply is different and slightly less complex because you don't have to go through an employment request with immigration. Your employment request only goes through our office. The extension of stay, you still have to deal with that either by applying to immigration or by travel, but you do get certain benefits. I'm a J-1 and I'm subject to the 2-year home residency. How does that affect me? That's not really part of the rule. So we have workshops on the two-year home residency requirement, but that's not really playing into the rule. The 2-year home residency impacts you in different ways. And we're not really here to talk about that, but I would say that being subject or not being subject doesn't specifically impact you related to these changes. If I apply for J-1 post-completion academic training before September 15th, do I have to file for an extension of stay? No, you don't. So if you get that request in before, I'd say 2 weeks in advance, and we're able to extend you, because what we're doing when you apply is we're adding the academic training and we're extending your end date, then you could get that longer end date without applying for an extension of stay. You'd just be transitioned to that longer end date. So if you are in range for applying for J-1 academic training before September 15th, get it in there and let us get that processed for you. If I apply for post-completion J-1 academic training before March 18th, 2027, do I still have to file for an extension of stay? Yes, you do still have to file for an extension of stay, but you can work. So the transition for provisions for J is because the academic training goes through the school. No matter what, if you apply for your academic training, you can work on your academic training for up to 240 days while you wait for the extension of stay to be processed if you applied through immigration. If you apply before March 18th, you do have to apply for an extension of stay, but you could keep working until the end of your DS 2019, even if it's beyond 240 days, as long as you requested your academic training before March 18th. So that's how the provision works for you. But you do still have to extend your stay, either by applying to immigration or by travel. So you either apply to immigration and you can keep working, or you have to apply by extending your DS 2019 and traveling and returning. And then both OPT and academic training, people are asking, is this going to affect my job search? It's possible. Things are more complicated for you. So, you have to really plan ahead to apply and get your authorization. You're going to go through more complex processes. So will it affect your search? Possibly, because not doing things on time, you're really going to have to be on top of things, reading our emails, following instructions, and just be prepared that processes may take longer for you to get work permission. Okay, so we made it. All the information, all the questions I could answer. And here are your resources. Our duration of status webpage. Again, we're going to be updating this, adding informational materials, webinars, videos, FAQs. Our professional organization, NAFSA, has a lot of information. They have an analysis of the rule that's very, very complicated. It's for people like me that do this for a living. But if you really like reading stuff, you can look at it. The International Student Resource Center, they have a lot of information that's more made for students. You might look at their review of the rule and their FAQ. Keep in mind it's pretty basic, and you're not going to get really deep answers, but it may give you some overviews. The government has put out quick facts and frequently asked questions for F-1s. J-1s are run by a different part of the government and they don't have questions and answers yet. But if you're an F-1, you could look at that FAQ as well. Just keep in mind it's pretty basic. It's not getting into really sophisticated questions and answers. And then finally, if you do have questions, you can email us, you can call. We have advising services Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and we will be starting our regular services for the fall again next week. We'll be virtual in the morning, in person in the afternoon, and we're ready to see you this week. Just check our website to see what our current hours are, and we will be able to see you this week. We still only have appointments in the morning, but we'll be back to normal drop-in advising starting next week, where if you wait in the queue and you get in the queue soon enough, you will be seen. Just keep in mind our ability to answer questions about this rule is still fairly limited. We're still learning, we're still getting information, we're still very much building processes because it's new and there's a lot of complexity, but we'll do our best to see if we can get you an answer, or we'll take back your question and we're building some FAQs so that as we gather questions, we can answer. So I hope that this was helpful. Please go back and re-review. If you have friends that missed it, please let them know. There will be a recording soon, likely in the next 3 days or by early next week, and we will post the slides online. So I wish you all a good morning, good evening, or a good night, and I hope to see you all here in early fall.